Big shout out to Hehaka Akichita. That is otherwise known as Elk Soldier, and they are good brothers, Glenn and Gary Drapo. And this is Cut to the Chase number 24, Lila Daya Yahipalo. I just want to say thank you all for sticking with us. I've been looking forward to this episode because for the first time since we started, and I just want to thank you all. I want to thank Troy, Lauren, Amber Towers, Dylan Mahoney, Sharon Grisdale, Lauren Bursch, Heather Rind. Thank you all for signing on, all the way from Martha's Vineyard. Please, or the island of Nape, from Wampanoag territory. I really do thank you for signing on, and most importantly for sharing the stream. As you know, this is episode number 24, and we wouldn't be able to come at you every single week, except for last week. I was in ceremony, and I know that, groups like Elk Soldier, groups like Bad Nation, these are drum groups that have given us permission to use their music on Cut to the Chase, just so long as we give source credit and so long as you know where to find them. We would love for you to visit them as well. Again, their names are Elk Soldier and Bad Nation. Of course, Not Ani Means has been a consistent provider of talent, of his art, of music. Shatescott Martinez is another young brother. If you don't know who that artist is, please look him up. He's been another generous contributor of talent and art for the purpose of Cut to the Chase. And I just now saw Spur Pourier, a brother from the Pine Ridge Reservation who has just hit 1 million streams on his platforms. And I want to say thank you, just for giving your art to the world, for sharing it. And we've got shows coming up that we don't know when they're going to be, but I've got agreements from her name is Janae Collins, and she's got a role in Martin Scorsese's film Killers of the Flower Moon. I don't know if any of you have read that book. Thank you all for signing in. I can see you all signing in. My comments are working this time. But I don't know if you've read Killers of the Flower Moon, but it is an amazing investigation into the Federal Bureau of Investigation. That's how the FBI got its start, was down in Osage territory, or Wajaje as they call themselves. But the Osage, as you know, are now down in what's called Oklahoma. Anyhow, we'll save that for a little later, because I also sent word to Tatanka Means. Bad Nation used to be a rock band. I think that's Bad Company, Adrian. Maybe I could be wrong. There could be a Bad Nation that's a rock band too. Bad ASS name there. But Tatanka Means also has a role in Killers of the Flower Moon. We're going to reach out to Tatanka Means. Any of you who you should follow these people on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook. Janae Collins, Janae Collins, Collins. She is an Indigenous actor, among other things. And of course, Tatanka Means is a comedian, is an actor. I mean, this show is to support, to uplift all of Indigenous creators. There's a lot going on. Shout out to Sam Bordeaux from the Rosebud Sioux tribe. That's a good segue into, the first item of our show tonight, which we've been covering a lot lately, of the Indigenous Holocaust, the genocide that has been exacted against our people in the most inhumane ways imaginable. But also, it's important to remember that genocide, those policies, those attitudes, that ethos, that misinformed way of viewing the world persists to this day. the residential and boarding school era simply transitioned into the departments of social services, into the Canada Scoop, or the 60s Scoop, transitioned into states like South Dakota, other states like California, like Arizona, New Mexico, wherever there's Native people. Our young Indigenous peoples are still subjected to sort of a snatch and grab, a cash for kids scheme that sees states like South Dakota violate the Indian Child Welfare Act. So it's by no means over. But for our first story tonight, we wanted to give presence and honor and homage to 9 children, 9 bodies that have been disinterred from the Carlisle residential or boarding school and reinterred inside the territory of the Rosebud Sioux tribe, which is one of the bands of the Lakota Nation. But we definitely want to thank the Rosebud Sioux tribe, thank everybody who was involved in that and who continues to do this healing work, to give their time, their energy, their spirits to these atrocities. Because you can look around mainstream media and you can kind of see that it is kind of fallen off, and that is the reality when we don't control access to those channels. But we do hold our own destiny in our hands, and we are strengthening ourselves as even though we are confronted with these challenges, because no doubt people are going through the worst of it. So much so that even though it's been covered on some of the United States mainstream channels, Chinese media, what Facebook always identifies as state-controlled media, CGTV, China media had reached out to myself and to a brother in Canada and a sister in Canada who also went on to Chinese media. And we, of course, nothing goes without criticism. But whether it's China media, whether it's Russia Today, myself, I'm willing to go on any channel. I'll go on Israeli TV. I'll go on Palestinian TV. I'll go on China TV, India TV, Russia Today, just the same as I'm willing to go on corporate state-controlled media in the United States, like CNN, like MSNBC, like Fox News. I'm willing to go on all of those channels, and I don't hold any of them as unreachable or inaccessible by those who are singing the song of Indigenous people, those who are expressing the Indigenous perspective as it is confronted with, as it is navigating and evolving those colonial institutions which have to this day tried to erase us, tried to exclude us, have marginalized us, and kind of only call us up whenever it suits them, not when it suits us. So I want to thank the Rosebud Sioux tribe and all Indigenous people and all of our allies across this continent in what is now called Canada, what is now called the United States, who have stood by us, who have not judged us, or who have not grown weary of our critical processes, our critical thinking, and our spiritual healing. Because these are not just news stories to us. When there's 751 children found in a mass grave at Cowessess, when Pope Francis recognizes the wrong people, he recognizes the Canadians who are experiencing a great loss, but Pope Francis never once mentioned the families of those Indigenous children who were murdered who were killed, raped, sexually tormented, and whose DNA was altered, whose intergenerational trauma is still experienced today by Indigenous peoples. This isn't something that happened with our ancestors hundreds and thousands of years ago that we should have gotten over by this point. You know how people say that, just get over it. It's time to get over it. The truth is that we are working through that process. It is an open wound, and it's going to take time. So I just want to say thank you all for standing with us. We will talk a little bit about the residential schools and the boarding schools. I know I've covered this issue, and I'll continue to do it, because just because mainstream isn't talking about it, a lot of times actually that's signal that we should be talking about something. And then after, thirdly, there is a long journey of a totem pole. And if you're familiar with the totem pole cultures from Western coastal civilizations, they have constructed a totem pole that is traveling all the way to Washington, D.C. And it's called the Red Road to D.C. And today they were in the Sacred Black Hills. They were in Rapid City, South Dakota, in and around that area. So we definitely want to. I could not get one of the organizers to come on, and my apologies. I did not know that you were going to be in the Black Hills today. I had some things to take care of, and I reached out to them in kind of a last minute fashion. But, you know, if it wasn't for the last minute, nothing would really get done in my life. So, but I still want to highlight the Red Road to DC and shout out to the organizers, like the Native Organizers Alliance. I know that Judith LeBlanc is part and parcel to that effort. I even know that Louis Grassrope I've been following his post, that he's following that totem pole all the way to, I don't know if he's going all the way to DC, but you should know about it, and people should be able to join that as they see fit. Lastly, I sent a message out to Jacelyn Charger and Danny Grassrope and Joseph White Eyes. They are on their way to line 3. Let me just check. I sent them the link to jump on to our cast as they are able to, and they are literally running right now. If you follow Cheyenne River Grassroots Collective, they are right now making their way to line 3. So I wanted to catch up with them, but I don't know if we're going to be able to do that. We'll find out very soon. If Jacelyn, if you're out there, or Danny Grassrope, follow Danny Grassrope. They're chronicling their spiritual run all the way to line 3. And if you're following line 3, if you're following some of the organizations that are standing up for our people, for our treaty rights, for our children's right to clean water, it's important that we support these organizations. And we'll cover more at the end of the show when I'll finish up talking about line 3. But right now, I want to take us back to the and thank you all for tuning in. I saw a bunch of people log on, a bunch of people who hopefully are sharing the stream, who have hopefully subscribed to our podcast on anchor.fm. Search for Cut to the Chase Iron Eyes, and you will find our podcast there. This is episode number 24, and thank you all for joining us. We could not do this without you sharing your perspective in the comments. I'm able to see all the comments, and we're going to spend a little time updating you on the latest pertaining to the boarding school and residential school debacle that we find ourselves in, that we are able to share our perspective on. And to begin, I'd like to ask our partners in the control room today. We're missing one of our guys. He is sequestered in ceremony right now. And there's, like I covered on my last episode, this is a time of ceremony. From the time that the Thunder Being gets here, the Thunder Beings get here in somewhere around, the spring equinox, March, somewhere around there. It doesn't follow no particular rules, but we're blessed that the cycles are renewing themselves. We lose people here and there to ceremony, and it's my honor and privilege to be back with you right now. But I want to ask control. We do want to show a video about the Rosebud Sioux tribe and the 9 children that they have reclaimed. So if we could roll that in, please.
9 Native American children who died at a boarding school hundreds of miles away have finally been returned to South Dakota.
They were from the Rosebud Sioux tribe and attended the Carlisle Indian Industrial School in Pennsylvania more than 100 years ago. A group accompanied their remains back to Rosebud tribal land with a stop on Yankton Sioux tribal land today. KELOLAND's Dan Santella shows you how this journey is not the end.
The caravan with the children's remains arrived with roars of motorcycles to this spot behind the Fort Randall Casino and Hotel just east of the shores of the Missouri River. A ceremony marked the occasion.
It was a relief, and it's sad that it took so long to bring our children home.
Mallory Arrow, Christopher Eaglebear, and Asia Black Bull are all members of the Rosebud Sioux tribe in their early 20s. Each made the trip from Pennsylvania back to South Dakota.
Kids are family. As a Lakota, that word right there means the people. It means love. We extend our hand out to one another.
This is just one small victory for us, and everyone's celebrating, everyone's coming out. So that's one important takeaway is don't give up.
Today it just feels really surreal to have as much supporters as we have on our way back from Carlisle. We've stopped multiple places, multiple reservations, and they've welcomed us, said prayers for us, fed us. And yeah, it's just really surreal to finally have them come home.
There is a distinct connection between 2021 and the past that isn't that distant.
It makes me really, really honored to be Lakota. It makes me honored to be able to grow up in this way of life.
This isn't the end of the journey either.
This is just the beginning. We have so many relatives buried at Carlisle and at other schools that we need to be bringing home, as well as other tribes that need to bring their relatives home.
This is just the first stepping stone in trying to uncover America's history so that we can move forward as a better nation, not just as Lakota people, but as the American nation too.
Those are our relatives, and they deserve to be home.
I thank you.
Near Pickstown, South Dakota, Dan Santella, KELOLAND News.
Wow, I was not able to follow that closely while it was happening. So I do want to thank Mr. Eaglebear and the young woman Asia. I believe her name was Black Bull. I'm not quite sure, but that was Ben Rod at the end there. And I know Russell Eaglebear is also somewhere not far from there, because just like Phil Two Eagle, President Rodney Bordeaux, Wayne Fredericks, people from the Rosebud Sioux tribe who no doubt had a huge role in making sure that journey, if you can imagine this, that their bodies were disinterred from Carlisle Indian School, and they traveled thousands of miles back to their homelands. You can't really even grasp it, that some of these children never knew what their fate was going to be. A lot of the parents of these children, and you can see old photos of our grandfathers and our grandmothers camped outside of these residential schools, wondering about the safety of their children. And a lot of times we're talking thousands of children. In the United States, at a minimum 20,000 children at over 300 boarding schools all the way up to 350 boarding schools. I would recommend boardingschoolhealing.org, National Native American Boarding School Healing Project. That is a great organization. I would recommend that you go there to learn more. But a lot of times the priests, the nuns would tell our families that these children had run away, that these children were unaccounted for. And they would just straight up lie to our families and to imagine or tell the children that their parents didn't want them anymore, that their parents didn't love them, that their parents and their families and their grandparents didn't know God, did not know the divine, were uncivilized, were savage, were barbaric, were abominations, were subhuman. These are the things that were taught to our grandmothers and our grandfathers. That is why we are only righteous to recognize that we are confronting these colonial legacies every single day, not only in the violent, racist, settler mentality and policies of states like South Dakota, or sometimes even in Washington, or in Canada, wherever there's natives, we are still confronted by genocide. The stated or unstated goals of these colonial corporate nation states like the United States and Canada is still to absorb us, still to subsume us within their body politic. That is still the stated goal. Even though we have an Indigenous person inside the cabinet level as the Secretary of the Interior, their goal is still the absorption, the non-recognition of our nationhood, of Indigenous nationhood, our right to free, prior, and informed consent, for instance. So we've got to be very, very careful, because the colonizer is extremely clever, brilliant, extremely fluid, and diabolical in its aims, in its project, in its experiment here in our homeland. And we need to recognize that they are alien, they are foreign, and they are our guests. Many of their children do not want to inherit those legacies, which were used in a very abhorrent genocide. And they do not want to deny it anymore. So that's why I'm saying all of our allies who have stood with us, literally who have paid attention to a show like this, have passed the muster. These are our friends. They have shared the truth. They have shared this stream. They've shared their perspective here. And we can change the entire globe with that kind of allyship, this kind of leadership, this kind of truth sharing. That's why it's, who knows? You know, I saw a comment earlier, I don't remember who knows when I'll end up on CNN or MSNBC again. I've been to those networks and they give me 3 minutes, 90 seconds. They cut me off. They cut all of us off, not just me, everybody who ends up there. This show is coming straight from the grassroots, and that's why I went on a Chinese state media channel, and I want to play. It's going to be weird because I'm gonna ask to roll in a video of my interview, so it's me rolling in Chase Iron Eyes, but I want to share this interview as well as Deb Haaland's, because we're also cutting this material for our podcast. And please, if you have not subscribed there, please find our podcast and subscribe there, because This is how we are going to grow. This is how we are going to continue to make sure that the truth cannot be ignored. But without further ado, otherwise I'm just going to keep talking. And this is what happens when I don't have a script. Believe it or not, I've begun to script. I've begun to work with a teleprompter for the first time ever on Cut to the Chase episode number 1, way back in February 9th of 2021. And so I do want to go ahead and roll in that Chinese media interview, and we'll follow that up with a Deb Haaland piece. So Control, if we could roll that in, please.
Joining us now is Chase Iron Eyes. He is at Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota, and he is an attorney to the Lakota People's Law Project. Chase, great to have you with us.
Good morning. Good to be here.
We just heard from Karen Joseph in Canada talking about the serious abuse of Indigenous children in Canada. In fact, that has prompted the Secretary of the Interior here in the United States, Deb Haaland, who is herself Native American, to launch an investigation. These schools were established in the United States as well. In fact, some of them still exist in the United States. What can you tell us about what goes on at these schools?
I think that we are now finding out the depth and the gravity to which the United States and colonial corporate countries like Canada and the United States and other derivations of the British Empire and Western European Christian civilization have hidden from the world, have hidden from the public, the depravities, the mass graves, the massacres, and the internal overt policies of countries like the United States and Canada. For some reason right now, our children are unearthing themselves so that we can no longer ignore the genocide, the Holocaust that is the Indigenous Holocaust of what is now called the Americas. To this day, this has been denied by the occupying countries of our homelands, of our territories. And now, even though the colonial process has caused the Indigenous people to adopt some of the imbalances of the Western Christian metaphysical reality, we are now struggling to come to terms with the truth. Even though the United States is illegally occupying our country because we entered treaties with the United States, they must now recognize the truth. If this country hopes to heal, if this country hopes to reconcile and survive as a nation state, as a republic into the future, it's not just the Indigenous genocide and the Indigenous Holocaust. It's also the transatlantic slave trade, which brought hundreds of millions of Indigenous Africans to our continent. They are also here. They are also willing to rewrite the social contract, the fundamental archetypal agreements that we have with each other as human beings who were taught to call ourselves Americans, who were taught that Native Americans were extinct or that they were vanishing, and certainly that they were erased by all institutions of Western existence. So the truth can no longer be hidden, and we are finding this out in real time.
Chase, you have called for an inquiry and investigation, something modeled along the lines of Canada's Truth and Reconciliation Commission. You have proposed a Truth and Healing Commission. Are you still pursuing this effort, and how far have you gone with it?
Yes, sir. We are pursuing the effort in terms of President Biden, in terms of Interior Secretary Deb Haaland, who is the first Indigenous woman to hold a cabinet-level position in the government of the occupying United States. To be Indigenous in what is now known as the Americas mean that we have these different identities. And so we are pressing Deb Haaland. She is responding in kind. There is nobody better situated to handle the sheer magnitude of what has happened in this country. She has created the Federal Indian Boarding School Initiative, it's known as, and she will begin to study the mass graves, the children's graves that are at these places they call schools. These were not schools. These were torture camps. These are concentration camps where our children, my grandmother, my grandfather, and my mother went through unspeakable horrors at the hands of religious institutions, at the hands of nuns and priests. And so we want the United States to find out the truth, to not withhold the truth from us, from its people. We need to investigate all mass graves, all cemeteries, all records, all internal documents of the Department of the Interior, which still run some of these boarding schools or residential schools as they are known. The Catholic Church is one of the largest landowners in what is now called the Americas.
Right.
They have done this, and we want the priests and the nuns, some of whom may still be alive. If we can prosecute Nazi war criminals at 90 years old, we can certainly find who did this to our children today.
If we look at the Canadian experience, the Canadian Commission recommended a list of 94 calls to action, if you like, but that was in 2015, and since then only 8 of those actions that they call for have actually been implemented, and they were focused on things like disparities in health, education, and criminal justice. Do you have any specific proposals here with the commission that you are proposing in the United States?
Yes, we are proposing that the church, the Catholic faith-based community, begin to hold itself accountable. The Pope Francis, Pontifex, has yet to fully appreciate what his organization, 1 billion people strong, has instigated against the genocide and the Holocaust that it is responsible for, and that it is still complicit in if it chooses to deny the truth. Being one of the largest and wealthiest landowners of our stolen land here in the Americas, the church needs to give land back to Indigenous peoples, especially in light of the climate crisis that we find ourselves in today. That is not even to mention reparations for the harm and the horror and the ongoing intergenerational trauma that we experience today. I am communicating with the world in the language of my colonizer, of my colonial occupier. So we need to tell the truth in order for there to be a healing. And I fully expect the United States and Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and United States President Biden to be held to an account in this time of reckoning. We didn't choose for our babies to be unearthed, but they are coming to the surface, and with them comes the truth of the last 500 years of illegal subjugation and ongoing political, economic, and juridical subjugation of Indigenous nations in our hemisphere. It is illegal. It is not right. What happened during the boarding school and residential school era has transitioned into the taking and placing of Native American children in violation of federal law in the United States. So this process and this has not stopped for us.
Chase, you know, the former United States President Teddy Roosevelt, whom I should add was educated at Harvard University, he once said, this is what he said, "I don't go as far as to say the only good Indian is a dead Indian, but I believe 9 out of every 10 are, and I shouldn't like to inquire too closely about the 10th. Have those kinds of attitudes, in your view, changed in the United States?
Absolutely not. You know, on a large scale, yes, but in the territories, in the parts of this country that overlay on, our traditional homelands, our treaty territory. Speaking of the Sioux Nation, the Oceti-Sakowee, there is very much still a violent settler mentality that pervades the political and institutional spheres of states like South Dakota. You have a governor right now who threatened to breach our borders illegally and almost caused an armed conflict in 2019. This is happening when Donald Trump was the president of the United States. He gave license to this violent settler mentality that expresses itself in the proliferation of white supremacy or the attempted institution of white supremacy, which is crumbling from within. But when those institutions are breathing their last breaths, they will do anything out of their own fear and confusion to preserve those institutions. So that mentality it's baked into the fabric. It's woven into the fabric of this country. The erasure and genocide of indigenous peoples. I mean, we're the rightful and righteous landowners here. So if I'm a Western civilian, the last thing I want to see is an indigenous person that knows what they are, who they are, and knows that they have superior sovereign rights related to mine as a settler.
Chase, we are going to have to leave it there. Time has caught up with us, but thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you again for inviting me. Thank you for catching up with that. I felt very weird about rolling in a video of myself, but also I couldn't really have said it like that right here today, and so I wanted to share that with you. And I do recognize that it is Chinese media, and they have, somebody in the comments said, you are aware that China has egregious policies with respect to Tibet. And of course, I recognize that. I also recognize that the United States has a genocidal policy with respect to indigenous nations. Not its indigenous peoples, but indigenous nations that predated the United States. I recognize that they are still trespassing and causing egregious harm with the Dakota Access Pipeline, which is an international act of aggression and an ongoing trespass. I realize that they're doing that with Line 3. I also realize that the United States is still in illegal possession of the Black Hills. Does that mean that I should not go on CNN? Does that mean that I should boycott MSNBC or all American media channels because the United States is executing a genocide against my people? Like I said in the beginning, I will go on Israeli media, even though the Israelis have egregious policies, apartheid-like treatments and interfacing with the Palestinians. So grant me this latitude to go wherever I may, nak e nula wa uelo, and share my truths. Thank you very much. So, Control, if we do have the interview of Deb Haaland, and I do want to show that, but I want to thank you all for sticking around for this, because it's not just the Rosebud Sioux tribe, it's also the Sisseton Wahpeton Sioux tribe who, oh man, it might be horrible there too. It's going to be horrible everywhere, my relatives. There's no easy way around that. Thank you to Swan American Horse, who just advised us that the runners are now in a place called Fairmount, North Dakota. And Jacelyn Charger is, while the video was running, I was offline trying to contact her, Jacelyn Charger, and others who are running all the way to Line 3, and they just can't get on our platform right now, which is called Restream. It's kind of like Zoom. And so, we would love to have the runners, including Jacelyn Charger, including Danny Grassrope and Joseph Whiteeyes. I saw Joseph Whiteeyes running, but if they're able to join, we're gonna bring them in a moment's notice. But in the meantime, I would like you to hang around. Again, if you're just joining, this is Cut to the Chase of number 24. We are speaking right now again about the boarding school and residential school situation, a debacle, something that you can tell that mainstream is trying to slowly brush this back under the rug. And we simply cannot let them. And I don't think they're going to succeed, because people like Deb Haaland, and I grant her the most latitude in her position as the Secretary of the Interior to do what she has to, because ultimately she has to answer to President Biden, and she's got to answer to the natives. And that is no easy place to be. But Madam Secretary has since incepted the Federal Indian Boarding School Initiative, which will take a look at all of those boarding schools, residential schools, all of those institutions under her purview, under her supervision, under her jurisdiction. And she will find those children who may have been placed in unmarked, unnamed graves by people of the church who wanted to hide this from humanity forever. And for some reason, the truth is making itself undeniably known right now. So if you could stick around after we see this interview from Deb Haaland, we'll move on to what's next in the program. But thank you again for logging in. Thank you for sharing the stream. If you all haven't shared the stream, I always gotta shout that out, because that is a way that we reach our potential right now. And we're moving along. This is work. It's discipline. It takes effort for us to bring you a level of analysis and a breadth of storytelling every single week. But I also recognize that it's part of my responsibility, given the platform that I've been blessed with, that I've worked very, very hard for, that I've sacrificed a lot for over the last 10 years or 9 years. But a lot of it's not me. It's just I'm in a position to share a message. And I want to do that, but I also want to lift up those struggles that are happening right now in real time. So if we could roll in that Deb Haaland interview control, we'd appreciate that.
Like Canada, the United States has a painful history of creating boarding schools to try to reshape and re-educate Native American children. It was a practice that led to trauma, abuse, and deaths. For more than 150 years, Indigenous children were taken from their families and forced into faraway boarding schools. At one point, there were more than 300 such schools, often run by religious groups, some by the federal government. By the 1920s, over 80% of Native American school-age children were in these schools. Those practices ended in the 1960s. But now there is a reckoning, and a new federal investigation's underway. It's being run under the Department of the Interior, and I spoke with Interior Secretary Deb Haaland about this and her personal story. Secretary Haaland, thank you so much for joining us. I have to say at the outset that this is one of the saddest, most disturbing stories I've ever seen. To think of these thousands and thousands of children taken from their families, so many of whom never came back. The families never knew what happened to them. It's unspeakable. And your own family was touched by this.
Yes, it is a tragic era in our history, in American history. The boarding school era, I think about it as sort of one of the last-ditch efforts to get Native Americans out of their communities and put them into mainstream society. after, genocide, after the killing off of, vast numbers of Native folks so that folks could take their land. And it was tragic after everything else that had happened as well. And they took Indians from their communities and their families so they could indoctrinate them, right? To take away their clothing, to brutally, take away their languages and their cultures. And many children, yes, they never made it back home. I am grateful that my grandparents made it back home. I wouldn't be here today if they hadn't, of course. And so this is a history that all of us need to know about so that we can begin a healing process for the families who are still living with the generational trauma of the boarding school era, of the assimilation era, of all of the terrible eras of federal Indian policy that tribes have had to live with.
Do you have a good understanding, do you think, of what happened to the children who died?
Well, I mean, we don't know, right? And that is one of the things that we hope to find out with our federal boarding school initiative. It was widely known that in Indian boarding schools that malnutrition was an issue. If you talk to folks whose grandparents went to boarding school and they've heard stories, there's stories about kids jumping off of trains because they didn't want to go to the boarding school, running away and never being seen again. This was, there were many ways, yes, that children died in those settings. And that's one of the things that we're hoping we can find out.
And it was, as you said, a widely accepted policy in this country, in the United States, and in Canada. I read your quote from the Civil War veteran who founded the school for children in Pennsylvania, Carlisle, Pennsylvania, who said, and I'm quoting, "Kill the Indian in him and save the man." It is astonishing to think that that was the mindset behind this.
Yes, indeed. Native Americans weren't thought of as humans. We weren't considered citizens of this country until 1924. We didn't have the right to vote in many, many communities, some as late as 1960 or 62. We weren't thought of as valuable, contributors to this country. And yet today we see that, Native Americans have the highest rate of military service. The ratio is higher than any other groups of people. We step up to defend our country. And of course, today we defied all the odds. Many of our families, our ancestors persevered. My grandparents actually were part of the assimilation era. After boarding school, they went and worked on the railroad in Winslow, Arizona. My grandfather was a diesel train mechanic for 45 years. That's what they wanted to do, was get Native Americans off of their lands, out of their communities. And my grandparents did that, but instead my grandfather protected our traditions, even in a place that wasn't his homeland, so that I could know and learn what it means to be a Pueblo woman. And I'm so grateful that they persevered through all of that history.
As we know, Canada established an independent, what they called a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, to investigate this, to get to the bottom of it, to try to, and to issue a report. In our country, we have what you just mentioned, the Indian Boarding School Initiative. It's being run under your department, the Department of the Interior, but it was the federal government that was in charge of this system. So my question is, can we be confident that we're going to get to the bottom of it when it's the government, in effect, investigating itself?
Well, I absolutely feel that with our initiative that we can work on healing. I really feel, I mean, that's a goal for us, and we want to make sure that the families get the answers that they need and they want. The federal government has a trust obligation to Indian tribes. That is in exchange for all the land that essentially became the United States. This was all Indian land at one time. And so I feel confident that this is part of our trust obligation to Indian tribes, this initiative that we are moving forward with. I feel very confident that this is a new era, and we want to make sure that tribes have a seat at the table.
And ultimately, how do you see holding the institutions accountable that were responsible for this?
That remains to be seen. Of course, there's a lot of, recently I was able to participate in a ceremony at Carlisle. It's now an Army War College. It was the Carlisle Industrial School for Native Americans. My great-grandfather attended that school, and I was invited by the Rosebud Sioux tribe as they work to remove children from their tribe who were buried in a cemetery there to take them home to their homeland in South Dakota. And I think that it's up to every tribe, right? How do they want to move forward? What is their idea of healing, and what would make them feel like they've gotten the answers they want? And we're going to do our best to make sure that we are attentive to those needs.
Secretary Haaland, you also wrote recently about the challenge of loving your own country, a country that was responsible for committing these acts. How do you explain that to others, to other Native Americans who look at this and question, how can you love a country that has done this?
Well, first of all, my ancestral homelands are here. And I can't go anywhere else. This is my home, and this is where my family is. This is where my history is. We've been here for tens of thousands of years, and we want to make sure that we are defending this land for future generations. I believe very strongly in democracy, and if you look at tribes across the country, so many Indian tribes had long-standing historical democracies in their communities, and I am confident that our country can live up to its promise to people, to our citizens, and I want to be a part of that.
Secretary of the Interior, Deb Haaland, we thank you very much.
Thank you.
Wow, and that last graphic right there was just going to explain how it's not in the past. You know, the last of these forced or coerced boarding schools shut down in the 1960s, and I just you can tell, you know, all respect to Madam Secretary, but she's speaking on behalf of a colonial government, and that's a hard place to be. It's the same if you are a senator or if you are a congressional rep. We're going to have to confront the truth. And thanks to listeners like, I believe it was Carla Solis. I can't see, I read the comments as they stroll across, and then I got to get back into the show. But she essentially said that we are not willing to deny the truth anymore. And I sincerely believe that about my fellow Americans, my fellow Canadians, people who have been inculcated, people who have been assigned these identities. And these identities contemplate the creation and the otherizing and the villainization of the savage, of me, of we, the indigenous nations, who are still here, who are in a position now to share in real time with all of our listeners, like Elisabetta Prue, who said residential schools actually closed in the 90s. That's right, 1996 in what is now called Canada. I was thinking of what is now called the United States, but we are also recognizing, perhaps because of the Western civilization's cause of climate collapse, and China and Russia, the financial extractive war machines cause of climate collapse, and coupled with the global pandemic of COVID, we're all in this very vulnerable space, existentially, or however we want to look at that. Life is different. Life and death are in the same sentence now. We've got lakes drying up at Line 3. I forget the name of the falls. Follow GNU Collective. Follow Red Lake Treaty Camp. Follow, what's the one that Tasha Martineau is at? Migizi. You know, they're all sharing pictures of a dried up waterfall area and lake bed area, riverbed area. At the same time that Enbridge is being given permission to pump 500 million gallons of water out of these endangered river systems, which are drying up, which are subject to human-caused climate collapse. I sincerely believe that we are all experiencing that dread at 3 a.m. And could we bring that that graphic back up, Control, with all of the, this is who you should be following. And I did hear back from Jason, they were not able to get on right now, so we're going to have to probably reschedule that. But I'm looking forward right now to traveling and to stand in solidarity. Gooseberry Falls, thank you, Joan Goff, Beloit. Gooseberry Falls is what has dried up. And I saw that on social media, and your heart just drops. Your core is impacted. It's like it's undeniable. The impact that the human species is having on the planet, endangering us all. At the same time, there are over 600 arrests at Line 3 right now. And what you see on the screen there, resist _line_3, Camp Migizi, Welcome Water Protectors, GNU Collective. We'll leave that up for a little bit. Red Lake Treaty Camp, Honor the Earth. Please follow these accounts, because that's where you can find out firsthand from the front line. Now, Cut to the Chase is a media vehicle. It's a way for, and I guarantee you, I know the people that listen are already critical thinking and self-informing. You all educate yourselves, or you wouldn't just somehow randomly end up on this show. And I want to thank you for that. I want to thank you for your support, for always sharing the stream. I know I say it all the time, but that's because, you know, I like to watch good newscasts. I like to listen to podcasts. It's something that I do in my off time, so to speak, whenever that is. There's hardly any off time, but I'm looking forward to traveling to Line 3. And I know that there's been a call out for personnel, for allies, for people to come and stand in solidarity. But before I get too far into Line 3, I want to cover it and give some shout outs to the Totem Pole journey. And that is, of course, called the Red Road to DC. And you can see this map that the Totem Pole is taking all the way to Washington, DC. And it looks like they're going to pass through Line 3. I don't know when that is, but everybody should have eyes on the Red Road to DC and on Line 3. That is something that is going to continue to come into our consciousness, whether the mainstream likes it, whether the mainstream wants it, or whether they don't. They were in Rapid City, South Dakota today, and I just want, without further ado, if you'd stick around for this video, then we'll end the show on Line 3. I can't believe that were, I try to stick to an hour. I ask an hour of your time. Please, come and stick it out with us. There are many times when we go well over an hour, and you can log on to our podcast and subscribe to our podcast to listen to everything that we've done in the past. But I like doing a live show. I like being able to read the comments. I like being able to be in the pocket, so to speak. I like to be able to be in that seat, in the hot seat, because it helps me formulate the way that I think, the way that I speak, and having to respond to you all in real time. And that's a complete honor for me. Yes, it's a challenge, but that's how it's got to be. That's how it's going to be. So I want to roll in the video of the Red Road to DC, so you guys can pay attention to that. You can link with that cause online, on Twitter, on Facebook, wherever they're at. If we get somebody to come on, maybe with more than 2 hours notice, I do apologize for that, guys, but we will bring them on as soon as we can get someone. So Control, if we could roll that video, please.
I want to welcome everybody here, and I want to thank, the carving family that made the sacrifice to carve this, to acknowledge them. And I want to thank the organizations and the people that have been walking on this and taking care of this. Because in order to make this happen, it takes a lot of sacrifice and a lot of commitment. And there's all these different roles that people play in making something like this happen.
Piveshev, Mayane Wo Statnanehev. My name's Crystal Tubles. I'm Oglala Lakota, Northern Cheyenne. And just also want to echo what Nick said and just welcome all of our Lummi relatives and our relatives that represent the different nations across Turtle Island. It's really an honor to be here and to be able to host you. And I know a lot of love and time and energy went into putting this together to host. And so, just also want to acknowledge the Indian Collective team that sacrificed a lot and really put love into this. And I hope everyone feels that and feels the joy that came into this whole event.
Good morning to all of you. Sitki Kadam Sonasnat. My English name is Douglas James. My Stalis Siamowit. It brings us great honor to stand upon this land today. To stand here with the ancestors and with all of you, that we can mix our tracks together here today. And it is true, it feels like our family is growing. And that's kind of what this whole journey has been about now, is reaching out to one another. Ait Swallowing means of one heart and one mind. And to accept each other for who we are as brothers and sisters. We can do powerful things if we stand united. And that's what this poll has been all about, is to bring us all together, that we can and will use our voices to speak out across this land.
I'm truly happy to be here today. My name is Siamawit, and I'm from the Lummi Nation. It's an honor to be here. It's an honor to be here with our relatives here, carrying on in a good fight. And knowing that the Indigenous people have become organized as one, as my husband always sings about, one heart, one mind, the song he learned from the whales. And we're practicing the Indigenous way by just being united. In so many different ways, we've been separated from our own families, from our own traditions. But there's been some that held on and fought and wouldn't let go and stood strong, like as Sister Crystal mentioned, to fight back for the land. It must be done with prayer.
What we have done is to bring 17 nations together who've been working since the beginning of time to protect their sacred places. The Arctic, Mauna Kea, Bristol Bay, Thacker Pass, on and on. We have countless sacred places, but we brought 17 nations together with the power of this totem and the power and what the House of Tears has given to us as medicine. So I just want to say I am honored to be here in Hisapa. I hold all of you in my hat as we ride those metal horses in this spirit ride to DC. I believe that the impact that this movement is building is going to bring about transformational change. We're going to defend, but we're going to do more than that. We're going to develop. We're going to do more than that. We are going to indigenize. And when you have women, our women leading the Department of Interior, the National Parks Department, on every level, there are Indian women. You know what they told us this past week? They said, we thank you for this totem and this journey and coming to DC, because now people know Indian people, Indian women are a part of governing. Our voice not only counts, but it leads.
I wanted to share real briefly that this land that we're standing on here, this land was land that was reclaimed. It was reclaimed through the boarding school lands project when they started finding our children. And there's a big project happening here in the Hisapa, in Rapid City, to reclaim some of these lands. And this particular piece was a piece of land that was taken from us a long time ago and put into the government property. And then our people reclaimed it through their hard work and their sacrifice. And you know, there's a woman who worked really hard named Heather Dawn Thompson to help make that happen, and a whole team of people that work with her. And whenever we needed a place to create a place for our unhoused relatives to be, it came to our attention that this land that we're standing on was reclaimed, and that it was put in title back to our people, and it was put in the title of 3 different tribes: the Oglala Sioux tribe, the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe, and the Rosebud Sioux tribe. But here's the catch: on that title, it says on behalf of the Osheti Shakoi. And that's a huge political statement for our people, because here we have, you know, grassroots efforts that helped reclaim this piece of land. Then you had official, federally recognized tribes hold title to it, but on behalf of the Osheti Shakoi, which is our traditional government.
When we talk about land like this land here, it's nice. I'm thankful for the work of the Heather and all of the organizations that were involved here in Rapid City, but you have to remember it was our grandfathers that went to Fort Laramie to sign the treaty for this land right here. It was them that secured this land. And what's even more powerful is something that I call our inherent sovereignty. That is more powerful than anything, is our Lakota language, history, and culture. How we have been living for thousands of years. That is what's powerful. That is why we're organizing the Ocheti Shakoi to come back together, light the fires again, teach the children, speak Lakota to them. We have to control the narrative now. United States, stop dealing with, for our people, stop dealing with the state governments. We have no business dealing with the state governments. Our treaty is with the United States and with our native nations. Look, in South Dakota, we have a governor that's trying to do fireworks on Black Hills. That's their priorities. And something's happening that is more powerful than us. It's Unchimaka, Mother Earth. They call it global warming. The Washichu cannot take care of Mother Earth. They're neglecting it, so she's getting hotter and hotter. We're in a drought right now. They're not capable of taking care of Mother Earth because something that goes way back in history, and it's called racism and greed. They want the resources here from the Chesapa. You have uranium mining. You have gold mining. There's oil and gas projects in Wyoming here on treaty territory, pipelines. And then the state of South Dakota issues water permits or these mining permits on treaty land. We need to stop all that. We need to save the Chesapa. This is our altar. This is where we pray. This is our center. This is our Hochoka. And a lot of our treaty councils, remember, they came from the traditional chiefs. After they signed the treaties, they turned into the treaty councils that have been carrying the fight, the struggle to preserve the land, to preserve the language, the history, and the culture of the Ochete Shakoi. So when you hear treaty council, those are the descendants of the chiefs that signed the treaties at Fort Laramie. Now, the treaty councils, the IRA governments, we're all working together now. We have to bring it back together and move forward together.
Thank you for that. I was not able to catch that stream. I know that Indian Collective and Native Organizers Alliance were streaming that whole event there today, but I was just paying attention to Lexi Phil 2 Eagle there. And I agree. It's not just the Lakota people. It's also the Arapaho, the Cheyenne, the Apache, down in Oak Flat, all of the tribal nations that are connected to Bears Ears, all of the tribal nations that are connected to the Black Hills outside of the Lakota and Cheyenne and Arapaho, like the Crow, the Apsalake. I don't know how the Ponca are connected, but the people on the West Coast to the Black Hills, that is, I'm not quite. I know the Kiowa are, and I don't want to misspeak because I'm not of those peoples, but all of these lands are important to our identities. All of these waters, all of these sacred sites have been severed. It's like the colonial forces have severed the umbilical cord, have severed our connection from the Northeast, the Atlantic coast, the people of the Northeast woodlands, to all the way what is now the Southeast, during the time of removal, when Andrew Jackson forcibly removed the Cherokee, the Choctaw, the Chickasaw, the Muskogee, some of the Seminole, and that was in the Southeast. And then in what is now the Northeast, at the time that they were, during the French and Indian War and so forth, when Pontiac and Tecumseh were doing their best to organize the people of Mother Earth, the indigenous nations. We're at these critical junctures all the time. And the United States didn't enter a treaty with us because we came to them peacefully and with compassion and appealed to their better sides. The United States entered a treaty with us because we killed their soldiers in combat over and over and over again. Our grandfathers and our grandmothers fought the United States imperial forces. And for that, we were punished for the number of times that we beat them. Now, 145 years later, we have our population largely speaking the English language. Our populations to the south in the land of the Condor largely speaking Spanish. And we're fighting this 1,000-year war for our spirit and our mind, for our spiritual mind. And it expresses itself in the Red Road to DC. It expresses itself in the continued fight to stop the Dakota Access Pipeline, in the continued fight to get everybody over to Line 3. What we've experienced up to this point and what we are continuing to experience is nothing less than an attempted assassination of our character, of our identity, a spiritual theft. Usurpation is one of them fancy words. An erasing of our original experience, the way we would have interpreted and perceived the world prior to colonization. And the colonial apparatus is attempting to entrap us, to trap us inside their subsets, their institutions, their languages, their way of knowing this universe, in their laws, so to speak, in their economics, in their policies, in the way that the human being relates to itself and the human being relates to the environment which composes us and encompasses us. They have told us nothing but lies. The crafters of these histories and these narratives, they invented and created the dissonance within themselves. And now Indigenous peoples are in a position to fight back. This is a deliberate disintegration, an attempted disintegration of those values, those mores, those intangibles that hold us together as human beings, as members of the human species. They hold our mind, our spirit, our imaginations together and allow us to evolve. But make no mistake, it's not just Indigenous nations. They trap the world inside of that dissonance. Not only that, but they've inflicted physical, unspeakable traumas committed by nuns and priests who are subject to the authority of pontifex, of the Pope. These were committed on children that we know to be sacred. So we cannot stop calling for accountability. If people are uncomfortable, then that is a good uncomfortable. There is no progress but through struggle. So I want to just conclude tonight's broadcast by saying thank you. Thank you for sticking with us. Thank you for sharing the stream. I'm reading your comments as they're coming in, and I was not misidentifying. I was not speaking out of turn when I say that you all are self-informing. You are critical thinking beings. You found your way to this show, and I want to thank you dearly for that. I'm looking forward to joining forces, to finding out how I can be useful to the struggle at Line 3 to protect our sacred waters, to ensure that our ecosystems and our Mother Earth is protected, that our children who didn't ask to be in this position, that our children can have clean water and healthy ecosystems, that they can make a living from Mother Earth. We owe that much to all of our children. So I will continue to update you. Just turn on your notifications, subscribe to our podcast, and when we have something to say, you will get a notification that says Cut to the Chase is going live. Cut to the Chase is coming at you with that perspective that you've grown to appreciate. And I know what you're looking for when you come here. You're looking for the truth, and you're looking for a little bit of insight, a little bit of experience. I look for the same thing from you and from other people that I consort with. So I want to thank you for giving us your time and your attention. I want to thank Lakota People's Law Project for being our flagship sponsor. I want to thank Last Real Indians. I want to thank Indigenous Peoples Movement. I want to thank every other social media influencer, people that have these followings who've worked hard to build up this credibility, this socio-political capital, for sharing this stream. I get a lot of good brothers and sisters who say, look, we like what you do. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for sharing this stream. Thank you for doing the show. We are in critical times. We've always been in critical times. Like Chief Orville Looking Horse, the 19th generation keeper of Dehinchalawakan, the sacred buffalo calf pipe, has said, it is no accident, and it is your purpose to be alive right now, to seek your purpose and find how to fulfill that purpose. I agree with that. I co-sign that wholeheartedly. Again, thank you for signing on. Thank you to subscribe. Thank you for subscribing to our podcast. Thank you for doing everything you can do wherever you're at with whatever you have to bring about the kind of world that we cannot live without. We have to choose to create that reality. That prophecies don't fulfill themselves, brothers and sisters. That takes our sacrifice, and our action is prayer. Again, I want to thank you for tuning in. Lila, Wopila, Kanka, Ichichapelo. This has been Cut to the Chase, number 24, and we are out.